President of the United States of America.
Thank you and shalom. It is wonderful to be here in Israel. President Rivlin, Mrs. Rivlin, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Mrs. Netanyahu, thank you very much. I am deeply grateful for your invitation and very, very honored to be with you. On my first trip overseas as between the United States and the State of Israel. In this land so rich in history, Israel has built one of the world's great civilizations, a strong, resilient, determined, and prosperous nation. It is also a nation forged in the commitment that we will never allow the horrors and atrocities of the last century to be repeated. Now we must work together to build a future where the nations of the region are at peace and all of our children can grow and grow up strong and grow up free from terrorism and violence. During my travels in recent days, I have found new reasons for hope. I have just concluded a visit to Saudi Arabia, where yesterday I met with King Salman and with the leaders from across the Muslim and Arab world. In that visit, we reached historic agreements to pursue greater and greater cooperation in the fight against terrorism and its evil ideology. My future travels will take me to visit Pope Francis at the Vatican and then our NATO and European allies. We have before us a rare opportunity to bring security and stability and peace to this region and to its people, defeating terrorism and creating a future of harmony, prosperity, and peace. But we can only get there working together. There is no other way. Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, I look forward to working closely with both of you during my stay. We love Israel. We respect Israel. And I send your people the warmest greetings from your friend and ally, all of the people in the United States of America. We are with you. Thank you and God bless you. Thank you.
שמר יעבור לדום. שמר, דום. שמר יעבור לנוח. מות, נוח.
It's going to be. You are looking at history. Donald Trump has just landed in Israel on the first ever direct flight from Saudi Arabia. This is a triple fanfare now as you see the President of the United States, the President of Israel, the Prime Minister at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, where it is 3 minutes after 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yep, and it's historic. It's obvious too. As much as it's the first time that that you see the president the first time a U.S. president has gone to Israel on his first overseas trip, these two men know each other very well. From when there wasn't Prime Minister Netanyahu and it wasn't President Trump, it was a businessman and an Israeli politician.
That's exactly right. So from here he heads to Jerusalem with a packed afternoon of meetings. I always love when they get off Air Force One and they have that first meeting at the tarmac, and he shook hands, of course, there with Benjamin Netanyahu and the president and other leaders. And there already seemed to be such an excitement that he chose Israel, of all places, to be the second trip on his first international.
Right. It's interesting, we actually heard the microphone up. Maybe we can hear it again as they interact with each other.
This is interesting right here because, according to the New York Times, they say that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, had to convince a number of his ministers and people in his cabinet to come to the airport because they had heard that there was no time built in to shake hands with the president, so they weren't going to go. They figured we're going to see him later, we're not going to go. As it turns out, there is time built in. Right now they are running about 20 minutes behind schedule.
Let's see if we can listen in because we heard some of their mics earlier.
A lot of energy yesterday.
We have also a little bit of energy now in the Mediterranean. Now we are going to do it very well.
Minister of Culture.
Yes. Beautiful people.
Minister of Construction. And he's constructing a lot.
I guess, right?
Thank you very much for this. Thank you, sir. I'm there for you.
Minister of Science.
So good at you.
He's got a lot of science.
Just heard from Washington.
Good.
We have a lot of things to do.
Good.
Minister of the Environment. He's a sane one. Also of Jerusalem. 50 years of Jerusalem.
He's on the right side.
He's on the right side. That's right. Minister of Communication. And Rachel Glover.
Oh, thank you.
This is kind of natural doing the small talk thing. He's done this entire life. Get to know people, win them over quickly, and then find out how they can do a deal. You know, the word is out of Saudi Arabia, there was a lot of positive feelings in the Arab world about the president's remarks, about the itinerary, and you guys did an incredible job this weekend for 5 hours plus talking about this. But the one thing about the Israelis were a little nervous about the size of the weapons deal, $109 billion, and they're saying, my goodness, I think we got to bring this up when he comes here.
Yeah, they're certainly going to be talking about that. Also, Iran is sort of overshadowing both the trip in Saudi Arabia and this one in Israel. As you said, though, this is when President Trump is really in his comfort zone. He has this way of being self-deprecating, of making people feel comfortable, even in these moments where they can often come across stiff and uncomfortable. He's really the opposite of that. We saw him earlier with the Prime Minister saying, what is the protocol here? Walk us through this. You know, he's just very
Who goes first?
human.
Who goes second?
Yeah.
Well, the cool thing about being the President of the United States, protocol-wise, is even though you're at the airport, you don't have to go to baggage claim. There's somebody else that handles your bag. You're pretty much out on the red carpet. He and the First Lady shortly will climb on board Marine One that they have transported over to Israel, and then they're going to go to the President residence where they're going to visit for a little while, and we're going to show you all that stuff live. It's interesting, the dynamic behind the scenes is yesterday the Prime Minister had a closed-door cabinet meeting, and what they were trying to do was win approval for a couple of measures just to show the President of the United States that Israel is trying to do something to encourage the Palestinian economy and ease conditions in the West Bank, and they came up with a couple of things. They approved for the Palestinians to include expansion for a West Bank industrial zone. That's important. Also, and this is if you live in the West Bank in Jordan, they've phased in an extension of the operating hours at a key bridge there, and they have authorized Palestinian construction. About the 60% of the West Bank that Israel fully controls, known as Area C, going forward, they'll be able to do construction there. These are three important things that the president will be presented by the Prime Minister later today and say, look, I know you're here for the ultimate deal. This is what we did yesterday.
Talk about the ultimate deal. It'll be Jared Kushner and a longtime business associate lawyer, Jason Greenblatt, who will lead the charge for an Israeli-Palestinian deal. And we've heard this over and over again. And a lot of people come in and say, okay, here's the land breakdown that we're going to do. Oh, we're going to tell you what you're going to have. We're going to tell you what you're going to have. What do you think about that? This time they're walking in, they're going to hear both sides, and then they're going to come out and see if they can come up with an agreement proposed to both sides and do this long term. As he calls it, the ultimate deal will get done by listening first.
Absolutely. That's what President Trump just said a few moments ago. He said we can only get there, Brian, with this deal by working together. I also loved when he talked about the next generation. He said our kids, we want them to grow up strong. We want them to grow up free from terrorism and from evil. I mean, that's when it really hits at the heart, and we can all connect this. We can all relate to the evil that we face in this world.
Indeed, and in fact, moments ago, the president also said in his welcoming comments, this is a rare opportunity to bring peace to this region. And ultimately, that's what this is all about, is trying to figure out how people can get along over there.
When you say getting along, though, I mean, you saw that interaction right when President Trump got off the plane and Prime Minister Netanyahu said, put his arm around him and said, "It's good to see you, my great friend." I mean, they clearly already have established a very strong relationship that will play well throughout this trip.
Right. I think it's going to be fascinating because for the longest time, as long as I've been around, well, they always thought if you want to bring ultimate peace to the Middle East, you got to get an agreement between the Palestinian and Israelis. But over the last few years, it's kind of pushed back a little bit as we see the rise of ISIS in the area. We see the way Iran and Saudi Arabia have created such a rivalry throughout the Middle East. It's allowed the Israelis who always feel under attack to say, okay, you guys fight it out for a while. And a lot of the Sunnis say, the Israelis, we could probably do business with them. And for the longest time, for the first time in my lifetime, we're watching some type of relationship, even though it's under the wire, between the Israelis and Saudis.
Isn't that something? That really is a remarkable moment when you think about the hundreds of billions of dollars, the deal that we signed over the weekend with the arms deal and economics, and you think about where we were just right after 9/11 and the mood in this country, and you never probably thought that we would be right here in this moment.
And some are uneasy about it, to be honest. Because
some are.
We know where the majority of the hijackers came from, and we know that the Saudis sometimes say one thing and do another. So, but they feel as though this is the guy, these are the groups we're going to bet on. But I just think they have to make sure not to lock out the Shia because you're not happy with Iran. Don't lock out that sect of the Islamic religion.
Well, what's interesting is usually foreign visits like this, the metric that by which you measure it is what sort of accomplishments diplomatically you're able to accomplish. But yesterday and the day before, with the announcement of that $110 billion arms package, President Trump has introduced the dynamic of jobs, jobs, jobs. Yeah, we're going to get a lot of their money and we're going to put a lot of Americans to work. Also, apparently about $300 billion in other deals and investments. At the same time, the president made it very clear that Muslim leaders must drive out the terrorists, and he called on Muslim leaders to confront the crisis of Islamic extremism.
And so much of the positive reception that Donald Trump's getting is because he's not President Obama. And a lot of people, including the Saudis, whether you like it or not, and some love the idea of sidelining the Saudis. It didn't work to our advantage in the Middle East to this point. And because he wasn't there, Saudi Arabia seems to, on all levels, have bent over backwards to make this president look good.
That was really something
to bring in
over the
50 Sunni leaders to there for the day 2 of his address.
Absolutely. We talk about, the moment of the tarmac when they get off the airplane. Remember, it was just a year ago when former President Obama made that same trip. King Salman didn't even go to the tarmac to greet former President Obama. It was the complete opposite, as we saw on Saturday morning.
Right.
When President Trump came off that plane, there's this excitement of maybe a new era, a new relationship is forming between Saudi Arabia, the U.S., and, as we're seeing here, Israel.
Yeah, and certainly Egypt there, too. Al-Sisi and the president met when he was a candidate, and they really hit it off. And now that they're both leading their country, they seem to have an affinity for each other.
Well, folks, if you're just joining us, it's 12 minutes after 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Tel Aviv. You're looking live at Ben Gurion Airport, where right in the middle of the frame, you've got the President of the United States. He's slightly obscured by the man with the gray hair. There you go, Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. It's the welcoming ceremony. Behind him, you've got Sarah Netanyahu. You've got Melania Trump, who is dressed in how would you describe
a beautiful white suit. As she always looks classy as always. She's been getting a lot of praise for how she has presented herself, how she's dressed both in Saudi Arabia and now here in Israel. But you just think about the preparation that all of these nations go through. Of course, on our side we prepare, but when you're over there, you think about the months, the weeks and months ahead to just get everything perfect, because this is a TV spectacle, right? We're all watching this around the world. Absolutely. You see those flags in the background, the Israel flag, the American flag. You want everything to look perfect.
Every angle covered.
And by the way, if you want a good business, get into red carpet rentals, because that is the longest red carpet. It comes from 4 different angles. You know exactly where you're going to walk. It's almost like what I use for dancing, which is footprints. They know where to go.
I don't want to see you dance,
yeah,
Brian.
please. I promise you'll never do it.
Wait a minute, you dance?
Yeah,
I've seen you dance.
The dance floors aren't
dancing.
The dance floors aren't kind to me, but at least you know where to go because you see all the red carpet taped to the tarmac.
Yeah. All right, we believe that the president is pretty close to hopping on Marine One for a short trip over to the President Rivlin's residence. But before we do that, let's deal in John Hannity. He is live in Jerusalem, where the president is heading. And John, tell us a little bit about where the president's going next and what he's going to do today.
Sure, and real quick, Steve, Abby, and Brian, some of the people that he was shaking hands with on the red carpet, as you just talked about, included not only various religious delegations, members of the churches here, Greek Orthodox, but also the Prime Minister's cabinet, the various ministers there to greet him, along with Israel's president and Prime Minister, and their wives was Avigdor Lieberman, who's the defense minister here, along with Ron Dermer, who's Israel's ambassador to the U.S., and then, of course, David Friedman, the ambassador, U.S.'s ambassador to Israel as well. Now, as far as his schedule and itinerary, after he's done with the meet and greet here, he'll hop aboard Marine One, he'll chopper into Jerusalem, he'll land at an area called the Old Train Station, the first station. I used to live down the street from it. That area has been shut down for the last couple days. From there, he'll take his motorcade and he'll head to the King David Hotel, which is where he's staying here in downtown Jerusalem. And by the way, they cleared out that hotel for the president's visit. This afternoon, he's scheduled to go to the Old City, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Western Wall, and his trip to the Western Wall has already been a point of contention even before he stepped foot here in Israel. He'll go to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial, with President Rivlin, and then this evening he'll be having dinner along with the First Lady and Sarah Netanyahu, the Prime Minister's wife, at the Prime Minister's residence. You guys gave the bullet points on what is likely to be discussed here. His trip to Saudi Arabia, the massive arms deal, how that could affect Israel, any concerns, how it may or may not affect Israel. Iran, keep in mind that over the weekend, Hassan Rouhani was re-elected as president. Iran, perhaps the greatest threat to Israel. That will be discussed, potentially what could come out of that. And then obviously the quote-unquote ultimate deal, peace and the resumption of peace talks between the Palestinians and Israelis. Remember that President Trump met with Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier this year at the White House, along with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who has said recently he thinks that President Trump may be the best president to work out a deal. That remains to be seen. We'll see. But tomorrow, the president will be going to Bethlehem to meet with Palestinian Authority President Abbas. So we'll see what comes out of these meetings. This has been obviously a highly anticipated visit. As far as just to give you a little color about what's been happening here in the city, they've been gearing up for this, obviously planning for weeks. The U.S. delegation here working with the Israeli delegation.
Hannity, hang on just a second. Let's listen to the president and Mr. Netanyahu.
So why don't we shake hands? Whatever you want. Cross hands. Shake hands. Let Sarah and Melania do that. Go ahead. How do we do it? We'll shake hands. That's good. Thank you. Which one? I can testify to that.
Because the majority of the people of Israel, unlike the media, they love us. So tell them how you operate and they love you. We have something very much in common. Very much in common. We talk about
Go have a good time. Are you coming with us, son?
See you soon.
Some fascinating interaction between the two first
Very
couples of their
human moments,
respective
right?
nation. It
were just
reminded me of people
ad-libbing.
just getting ready for vacation.
Yeah.
Where do we want to go again?
Are you coming with me, honey, or are you going with them?
Right. I think we'll go to the end of the carpet and we'll shake hands and then we'll break.
Right, at the very beginning, just after we watched them welcome the triple fanfare as they get into Marine One right there, you know, who needs an advance man? The Prime Minister of Israel, and the president worked out, let's stop right here and shake hands, because the world press, all the photographers wanted an image of them all shaking hands. They stopped for a moment, and they did just
and they said,
that.
how should we shake our hands? They all put their hands over each other in one place. You know, this is a moment where you see just friends interacting with each other. You know, it's really a human moment to take in.
But I think a couple of things, Abby. I think that you have one person who's very experienced in all the ceremonial aspects of being prime minister and leader of a country, and the other one's brand new with it. And you have, and they're friends, and the nations are friends. And you say, let me take the lead on this. And he said, sure, whatever you want to do, and that's what you need. Also, I wouldn't have minded.
Well, he's a master packager. He's a master of the media. Donald Trump knows. Donald Trump, President of the United States, knows exactly what looked good on television. And if you are just joining us this morning at 6:20 Eastern Time, 1:20 in Tel Aviv, these have been stunning images of the red carpet arrival of the President of the United States on a historic visit. Moments just within the last hour. It was the first ever airplane flight between Saudi Arabia and Israel ever in history. And in his welcoming comments, the Prime Minister said someday he hopes that the Prime Minister of Israel would be able to make the flight to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, over to Riyadh. And now you have Marine One heading out to, well, they'll eventually be the president's residence, where they'll go out and plant a ceremonial tree. And that'll be the tree of friendship between the nations. And there'll be a little plaque, I imagine, eventually there commemorating this day. This will be there's 8 more stops for the president that's coming his way. This is going to be a blitz of impactful meetings, of course, which will culminate in NATO, and it'll be highlighted by a one-on-one meeting with the Pope. But it's already got off to an incredible start. Even the president's networks, which really have been feasting on being critics of this president, have a hard time being critical of this president. Among the people that were impressed, acting presidential, Bob Schaefer, the veteran newsman, says the president sounds and is acting very presidential.
And this comes at a time, as you know, that there's been so much turmoil here at home with his narrative.
I haven't kept up with it, has it?
Apparently there has been, but you know what? Talk about coming at the right time to change the narrative. As you said, Brian, to visit the 3 major religions of the world on his first international trip, and really to appear as presidential as I think we have seen him so far in this role. You mentioned, you know, the meetings that will play out the rest of the day. No doubt they will talk about the trip that he just came from in Saudi Arabia. Bibi Netanyahu spoke earlier, and actually praising the speech that he gave yesterday on terrorism, saying that it was a forceful speech of clarity and conviction. Something that we all have in common is fighting evil, fighting terrorism, also dealing with Iran. I mean, they just had their election, and, you know, they had Rouhani, who just won that re-election, and a lot on their plate, a lot they're going to be discussing throughout the rest of the day.
Indeed. All right. So they're heading to Jerusalem. As we watch, let's welcome to the program this morning Dr. Quanta Ahmed, a friend of this program, Muslim scholar and author of Land of Women. Dr. Quanta, what have you made so far of the president's first international trip?
Just dazzling images. I mean, I was here, I'd say, less than 12 hours ago watching the arrival in Saudi Arabia. I know both countries so well, Saudi Arabia and Israel, where I'm about to visit for my 9th trip. And what I find so heartening and almost tender is the simplicity, the egalitarian nature of the society in Israel, in the way it welcomed the president. You can see the difference between the incredibly gilded arrival in Saudi Arabia and the beautifully elegant yet simple welcome in Israel. These nations are very, very important. You've talked a lot about the Israeli-Palestinian peace situation, and also other issues, but I think very, very profound and top of the list is going to be Iran's influence in Hezbollah. Just 11 years ago, Israel was in a severe conflict with Hezbollah for 53 days. We know there is going to be another conflict. Hezbollah is implanted in the southern Lebanon, house to house. These are priorities. This is their knowledge of Islamism, not just the difficulties with the disputed or Palestinian territories, or however you like to refer to them. So that is going to be very high on the agenda. I'm sure the brilliant advisors, and in fact Prime Minister Netanyahu himself is an academic and a scholar, are going to be interpreting all of the knowledge from the GCC meetings, both in public and private, and also the address to the Muslim world. This is just remarkable. As we said earlier, this is the first journey of an American president from Riyadh to Tel Aviv, and I was actually thinking, I can't wait till ordinary citizens can go back and forth. I've been to both countries for so many years on separate journeys. They're a stone's throw away. It's just astonishing.
And Dr. Ahmed, too, they don't even fly over that country. Saudi Arabia won't fly over Israel. But let's contrast what's going on here. President Obama made a choice. I mean, for some reason, he had an inherent dislike, and maybe it was mutual, with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So for 8 years, they basically had a mini Cold War while knowing that the countries were still allies and cooperating militarily. And now you have somebody who were friends before they became leaders. Now they've become leaders, and there's more of an outreach of handshakes. This is a "we missed you, we need you" moment.
Yes, and Brian, what's coming through for me is just the extraordinarily unique persona of President Donald Trump. This person that nobody believed could be president, even his own political party. And yet we see the way he can engage with Saudis, clearly the deep relationship he has with the leaders of Israel, his very informal and almost avuncular manner in both settings. He's embodying the good-heartedness and the deep goodness of the American people that is here. We are not a complicated people in the United States. He embodies a lot of our values. It's very refreshing.
Doctor, that is a great point. So
I find myself to be very complicated, but go ahead. How dare you generalize?
Very much so. So once Marine One takes off, they'll be in the air for about 15 minutes as they head to Jerusalem, to the president's residence. But Doctor, I would love your thoughts on, you talk about the Muslim world, the Muslim community, their reaction to this trip so far, specifically the president's speech yesterday. I mean, he really was a forceful speech directed really at many of the religious leaders, saying, you need to step up, you need to help us in this fight.
You know, I watched the speech here after the end of the show with many of your sound crew and producers who have helped put us on air, and it brought tears to my eyes at the end. And I think the reason is that as Muslims, we have felt such pain about the dishonor our religion has fallen into. Not acutely, we noticed post 9/11, these awful things happening in the name of our religion. They are staining all of us. Most of us are absolutely innocent, and many of us are victims, as the president pointed out. This is very heartening. It's welcome. It was also anticipated. I was in Cairo at Al-Azhar University just 2 weeks ago, and they told me, we know President Trump is not candidate Trump. I met with Egyptian soldiers who said, we know President Trump is the friend of good Muslims, the enemy of Daesh and ISIS. We have great pragmatism in the Muslim world because we also understand jihadism intimately. And so this was beyond expectations. He talked about things important to Muslims. He talked about the soul, honoring God, sanctity of human life. He spoke our language.
Right. Dr. Quanta Ahmed, the author of In the Land of Women, we thank you very much. We should
stick around, Dr. Ahmed. We'll need you again.
We should point out that, it took about more than 5 minutes after the president and the first lady got into Marine One before they took off. Keep in mind, they use the same standard protocol in Israel that they do here in the United States. For security reasons, they always have 2 other decoy helicopters that look just exactly the same white-top helicopters, and then they have a whole bunch of other helicopters that are escorting them as well, because keep in mind, this is a gigantic security concern.
That's interesting. No matter where you are in the world, the protocol remains the same.
Right.
Because that's the way they do it.
Right. And there's no reason to get Alec Baldwin or Jimmy Fallon to dress like Donald Trump, to really go all the way with the decoys.
We have the real president here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
We don't need a fake one.
Yeah, we have fake helicopters, but we don't have impersonating presidents. But at about a 15-minute journey, he's going to be at the president's residence, and it's going to be a breakneck pace. I believe he's going to be in Israel for 28 hours.
Yeah, and we will be with you all morning long. You do not want to miss a
30 minutes. The stairs were a little late, but eventually he walked down what seemed to be 5,000 stairs.